my trusty co-host, the best and fastest researcher in the West. And tonight we have a special guest with us talking about his candidacy for the 75th district in the California State Assembly. And that's why I'm wearing my Local Elections Matter t-shirt, because local elections matter. As much as we've been talking about presidential stuff, this is the stuff that matters. If you want to change California, it starts right here. Our guest tonight is Andrew Hayes. Andrew, welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, why don't we just dive right in? Tell us a little bit about yourself, a little background, so people can get to know you, and then we'll go from there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. So I was born and raised in East County, San Diego. Currently live in Lakeside, and where I serve as the school board president in Lakeside. And I've been reelected twice to the board. And I got started in politics as a grassroots activist in college. So I started walking doors for our local Republican Party, and from there I met a lot of local leaders and activists, and then I got hired to work in the legislature. And then I got encouraged to run for school board in Lakeside, in part because the person that I chose to run against at that time, she was a 24-year incumbent. So she had been there quite a long time. And I had seen the district where I went to school starting to move in the direction of a lot of other school districts that we're seeing across our state, like San Diego Unified and others that are just, saying to the state, whatever you tell us, we're going to do, kind of thing. And I couldn't accept that, because that's not Lakeside. That's not my community. That's not where I grew up. That's not where my friends sent their kids, right? I mean, it wasn't a place to do that. So I said, I'm going to run, and I won. And then I ran again, and I won re-election. And so we've had a lot of great wins in my district that we can talk about later. But I really am just trying to make a difference locally. And as you say, local elections, they truly matter. And, when I got elected to the school board, I was in a 4-1 minority. I had two Democrats there. I had two Republicans in name only, really, because they would vote for tax increases and other things, and then me. And so, you can imagine that that's overwhelming, because when you first get elected, you're going, my gosh, I need to get something accomplished. And what I realized is, I just got to speak out and fight on the issues. And now we have a 5-0 board that I've helped flip over the past many years. And I've also helped other boards do that. And so it's really about finding those issues. So that's a little about me and where I'm from. I went to UNSD, University of San Diego, and I have 2 degrees. And I've worked for the state legislature. I've worked for 2 different legislators. And my knowledge about state and local policy is pretty deep.
Yeah, we've talked about on this show, and I want to dive into this. Running for school board. A lot of people are like, "Well, how do I get involved in politics? Where's a good place to start?" School board's a great place to get started, and people, especially now, maybe 5-10 years ago, it didn't seem super sexy, but with COVID and lockdowns, and now we have AB 1955. Like, school boards are really important. I think people are starting to realize that on a local level, how important school boards are. Can you talk about that a little bit in terms of like how important it is to just pay attention to who's on your school board?
Absolutely. So, you know what? I'm so glad you brought that up, because when I first ran for the school board in Lakeside, I was going door to door and talking to voters. And one thing that it really shocked me, quite honestly, what people would tell me at the door, they'd say, well, that's your job as the school. You guys handle that. And I'm going, don't give me that authority. Why are you giving your elected officials that kind of authority? Like, I mean, bad things happen when you just say, oh, hey, that's your job. You do that. No problem. And by the way, we've seen kind of the result of that apathy, if you will. And so what ended up happening was when COVID, and by the way, COVID really opened people's eyes, I think, to what is going on in schools. And the boardrooms, when I first got elected, there was nobody there. When COVID happened, everybody started showing up, because they started seeing what was happening in their schools, what the state curriculum really looks like, what the state curriculum really wants to teach our kids, right? What all this stuff is being pushed on our kids. And so I think COVID really showed that school districts are the front line of the fight right now in local politics. And one of the things that I always tell people who want to run for office, and a lot of times people want to run for office their first time and run for Congress or run for, the state assembly or whatever. And I always say, listen, I appreciate that, but we got to get people, you got to have that local experience, because I'm going to tell you, when you're elected to a local school board, and I'll just give you the perspective, school districts like mine in Lakeside, we have a $70 million budget and we employ 700 people in the community. We are the largest employer in Lakeside. And when you look at all of those things, you get a wide variety of experience. And why do I mention that? I mention that because you learn about governance, you learn about how to move the needle, and you learn about how to get people elected and swing the politics of your board, right? And you get to cut your teeth and advocate for issues and build a record. I had a mentor early in my career who said, it's an older phrase, but when a man promises you the world tomorrow, ask him what he did yesterday. Somebody who just says, hey, I want to go out and run, that's awesome. Now, if you're a businessman and you've built, if you're Trump, right, and you've built $1 billion, in business, right, okay, you've got a record. But if you've never run before, or you've never built a business, you've never done anything, and you've cut your teeth on a school board or anything like that, and you have a record that you can point to that's fighting for issues, that's a good thing, right? And that helps build our bench, and we certainly need to build our bench more. So I think that when we look at all of the local politics, school boards are the front line, because parents are being under assault from Sacramento constantly. I mean, AB 1955 is just one example, but COVID opened people's eyes, and I'm glad about that. So I want parents to still come to board meetings and be engaged, because they're the front line, and that's where people should be running. They should be looking for water boards, fire boards. All this stuff impacts your daily life more than, quite frankly, more than the presidency does.
Right. A little bit ago, you mentioned when you were knocking on doors and people were saying, well, that's your job. You do that. You figure it out. On your website, you mentioned that you defeated, being on the school board, you defeated a $66 million tax increase. And that would obviously, here they're saying, that's your job. You figure it out. People don't realize actually school boards can increase taxes on you. Can you speak to that a little bit? What was that? And
well,
that was nonsense. Great job, because
that was nonsense. Yeah, no, thank you for that. It was nonsense, is what it was, and I'll tell you why. So I get on the board, and it was one of the first battles I had to fight. The next battle I had to fight was the equity math stuff that we hear about. But that first tax battle was over a bond, and we all know that school bonds are property tax increases. And so when a school district says, hey, we want to leverage a bond on you, we want to increase taxes on your property, well, what they do is they love to say, oh, it's only going to cost you $6 a month, and it's blah blah blah, all this gobbledygook stuff they try to tell you to move the needle. But what I tell everybody is, look under the hood. Take a look at actually what's in the bond language. And so what ended up happening was my superintendent had approached me and said, oh, Andrew, asbestos is in our ceilings, and our pipes are full of lead, and the kids they're basically everybody's dying, and we need to build new school facilities, et cetera, and the bond is the only way to do it. It was a $66 million bond on property, with 30%, mind you, of that going to soft costs, consultants, other things.
Absolutely.
And I'm going, holy moly, no way am I going to do this. This is insane. Not only did the district, previously to me getting on the board, pass 2 bonds, and those projects weren't even completed, right? You're coming back to the trough and asking for more, and then 30% is going to go to consultant fees. This is typical government crap that everybody hates. And so I fought back, and we defeated it. So I was the lone no vote on that. And then what I did is I organized with our local community members and our local party, and we defeated that. And then Lakesiders voted 66% to say, heck no, we don't want this bond. So, I mean, we killed that bond. And people are not trustful of don't trust government, right? They think government sucks, which most of the time it does. And so when I look at all of this, I go, that's just one way that the school board member can impact local elections. But then you know what I did with that? With that knowledge, those 4 colleagues had voted for that bond. I used it to flip seats in my district. I used it to beat them at the ballot box and replace them with people who were taxpayer minded and focused, right? That matters. So you really have to, when you're electing people at your local level, you need to know if they're going to vote for taxes or not. You got to know if they're going to vote for any of this, because what they'll tell you is, oh, it's for the kids, oh, it's for this, oh, it's for the teachers, oh, it's for this. And those are great buzzwords to use. But when you look under the hood and you say, hey, 30% is going to consultant costs, that's nonsense. And of course, people in the district in administration at least, and have not forgiven me since I defeated that. I mean, they still hate me because I defeated that. So, and obviously so, right? They're probably going to get some of that 30%. So.
Yeah, it's especially what I always tell people when they see the word bond anywhere on their ballot. For me, it's an automatic no. I always say no on bond because it just means more debt. Talk about so your work alone is impressive on the school board to defeat that, but going from 4-1 to 5-0, I think is more impressive because you took what you had learned and said, okay, we're going to flip more local seats, which is so crucial right now here in California. Can you talk a little bit about what you did and what was your strategy to start kind of picking off those seats one by one?
Yep. So what I would do, COVID was super helpful in this because the parents of my community wanted our schools to reopen. And they wanted them open now. We wanted them open early. And Lakeside, we opened early. So what I did is I started a coalition. So I created what was called School Board Members for Local Control. And I called all of the board members that I possibly could, that I knew and had numbers for in San Diego County. And I said, hey, I want you to join this coalition because we're going to be able to push back on Newsom together. We don't win without a coalition. Coalition building is critical to beating Goliath. You got to have people with you. You cannot win on your own. You know, screaming on Fox News is not going to win you anything. You have to be able to build coalitions to do that. So when I built that coalition, what I would do is I would say, okay, we're all going to open early. We're all going to push together. And I would agendize votes so that to reopen, and I would place them on the agenda. I'd call a special meeting. I'd learn the rules of my policies as a board member, which I'd learned over the past few years, and just add votes to the agenda. Now, the board president at the time in my district was so angry when I would do that because I would just add the vote to the agenda. Well, you can't do that. You have to go through me. I said, who says? There's no one who says that. I'm a board member. I have equal access to it. I added it to the agenda. Any member of the public can add an item to a school board agenda. So when they tried to circumvent me and they wouldn't let me add it, I called in support her and said, well, you go to the district and say, under Ed Code, I want to add this, and then it's added. Why is that important? Well, when they would vote down reopening schools, they put themselves on record again and again and again with packed rooms of parents seeing that they weren't willing to reopen schools. And one of these members lost by 400 votes. I guarantee you it was those 400 members of the public in the room who saw them vote repeatedly against it that got them not elected again, right? And so when you look at this, and plus all the work that we did on the ground, but I think that the core point is finding these issues where they put themselves up on record voting for it that I can use in our community. And they don't represent, these people didn't represent Lakeside. I mean, they didn't represent the community they were supposedly elected to serve. They did not represent it. They flaunted it and said, no, we're going to do what we think is best. No, the people clearly wanted us to reopen, and all the science told us we could. And all the science told us that it's actually safer for kids to be in school than it was for them to be at home. And we knew all of those things were true. And we saw that in the data, and they just wouldn't acknowledge it. So I put them up on record on taxes, on COVID, on masking and mask choice for families, all the rest. I was able to do that, and we won. And it was fantastic because we went from, I mean, we flipped the whole board, and it took me a while to chip away. It took me 2 election cycles to do it, but we did it. And then I helped others do it, right, in other areas of the community, in other areas of East County. And so that, to me, I'm just very grateful that we were able to keep our seats and then go on offense.
I had a good question. Now I forgot it.
I'm sorry. I talked a lot.
It's all right. No, it's fine. The fact that that one member lost by 400 votes. I don't think people really understand in California. And I think there's so much apathy of voters who are like, it'll never change. We're such a deep blue state. Like, why does it matter? We're always getting wiped out. And it's like, if you look at a lot of races up and down the ticket, up and down the state, a lot of local races are this close. They are literally 400, 500 votes. Like, they're less than 1,000 votes. And people are pretending like, oh, everyone's just getting wiped out because it's all a deep blue state. Not so when it comes to like local elections and school boards and, like your seat that you're running for. All of these seats can be decided. What was it, Greg Willis out in
Yep.
like Palm Springs? That was like a
Lee.
couple hundred votes.
Yeah,
Like it's
something like
insane how close that was. And I think people really need to know that like you got to show up. Like you got to show up and get out there and vote, because it does make a difference. Have you seen that in your time in politics, that how close it is, and tell
Oh, yeah.
people like these are close races. You got to show up.
Yep, one of my closest friends, most ardent supporters, is on a city council, and he won his election by 5 votes.
Oh gosh.
Wow.
5. And I mean, we pulled out all the stops to help and ensure that we did the ballot checking, we did all the stuff that we needed to do to be helpful and make sure that he won by 5 votes, right? But I mean, 5 votes. So I always tell people, if you say, and look, I understand, I totally get why people are angry and frustrated about the system. I get it. I mean, I do. I'm probably better than most people. I mean, I see it. I understand why people would be pissed off. I mean, I get pissed off all the time. But I think that the thing for me is that don't let that impact you going out and doing your civic duty and voting and working to make change in your neighborhood. Don't tell the person who won by 5 votes or won by 81 votes that your vote doesn't count. They don't want to hear it, because they know that your vote for them could have counted, right? And it would have been better. But just because you feel we're getting wiped out, which, by the way, in California at a national level, I understand why people don't want to vote for the president in this state. I get it. We're spoken for. I understand. You got to do it anyway. Why? Because California helped deliver Trump last time, popular vote wise, right? I mean, it was so important that when we voted, we raised that popular vote number for Trump. We did the most volunteering for Trump from California. I mean, I always tell people it's so important to look at those things, is that California does have a lot of influence. So I don't want people to be discouraged to not vote. They need to know that your water board member, who can raise your fees and rates and all the rest, somebody you don't really like could get elected by 5 votes, or somebody who you really like could get elected by 5 votes. So your vote does matter. And I get it. People are mad and upset, but you got to get out. You got to be a part of the process, because if you don't and you take a seat and you sit back, then you're not a part of the process.
Absolutely.
I do want to kind of go back and get your views from a school board perspective on AB 1955. And it's something we've been talking about a lot, in the sense of how big California is. It's 58 counties. There's a ton of localities up and down the state that I don't even know exist. And, we joke, we had a guy on who's running way up in like the border of Oregon. I had never heard of the town. I didn't know where it was. Camille and I didn't know, but sounds beautiful. That's how big the state is. So we talk about how Sacramento is kind of attacking this idea of local control, where voters say, look, this is the school board we voted in. These are the members we voted in based on the policies we believe they will enact. And Sacramento comes in and goes, no, we believe, because we're run by, far left Democrats who all come from the Bay Area, we think you should adhere to our point of view. How frustrating is that as a school board member from that local level, to feel like your local power is just being sapped by Sacramento?
It's exceedingly frustrating. And it's a problem I've dealt with since I've gotten on the board here in Lakeside. And so what I had to make a decision very early on is, am I just going to sit back and accept what Sacramento says, or am I going to be somebody who says, no, we're going to push back on stuff? And I made the decision we're going to push back. So when COVID came, we fought for local control, right? And we said, listen, we cannot do this. We need to have local control. We're going to use local health metrics. We're going to do all these things because we're local. We know Lakeside. I was elected in Lakeside. I was not elected in Sacramento, and Bay Area did not elect me. Right. I mean, my community elected me. I know Lakeside better than anybody else, right? Because I was elected here. And that's part of my argument is, listen, we deserve to have local control. And by the way, if the state wants to run everything, get rid of our locally elected boards, then get rid of us.
Ideas.
I mean, right. I mean, I know. But what I'm saying is that, like, you want to run this stuff because they think they're going to compel us to do it. I'm okay with, I want us to fight. I want us to push back. So when it comes to bills like AB 1955 or COVID stuff, sometimes we don't have a choice because they'll say, oh, you've got to push this down. My argument is you have a choice to sue them, and you can go to court and you can take them to court. And so that's what I'm working on, trying to get my district on board to sue the state and join the lawsuit against 1955. We're already in federal court. We joined the Mirabelli versus Olson case from Escondido Union, which these two teachers had said, listen, we don't want to, we're not going to keep the gender of our kids secret from parents because it violates our First Amendment freedom of religion and it violates our rights. And the judge locally in the federal court said, yes, that's a complete violation of your rights. And so my district joined on and said, we're going to push on this too. It's a violation of our rights as well. And we're not going to walk into this problem either. And so we joined that. And so we're suing them in federal court over that very issue, the 1955 issue, where it's saying, school districts can't compel teachers to tell parents about the gender identity of students. And so, the state law, by the way, is just stupid. It's redundant, and it's not even it's so much grandstanding that I can't even fathom. I mean, it's just ridiculous. 70% of Californians don't support a policy like that, and it's just the loudest people do. And the arguments for the bill are, well, these kids are going to get hurt at home. And I tell them, have you ever heard of something called mandated reporting? Have you ever heard that a school district staff or board member or anyone, if you think a kid is getting attacked at home, you should have already reported that? This is stuff that it's just red herrings to get away from the fact that they want our school districts to trans our kids in many cases, right? They want this opportunity to do so. And everybody goes, oh no, they don't want that to happen. And I go, well, let's just talk about it then. Why is the age of consent for mental health services in schools 12 years old? I'm sorry, but it is. But it is. And so the 12-year-old kid could go. So let's talk about a scenario. I always give people a scenario in this, and they go, that's not possible. And I said, well, tell me how it's not possible. So a 12-year-old kid goes to a school counselor, and under the law, they say, I'm Jimmy, but they're actually Jane, and I'm Jimmy. Well, the law says that 12-year-old can consent to outpatient services. So the counselor, in theory, could say, okay, Jimmy, I know a fantastic therapist or any kind of outpatient service, and you should go speak to them. And I won't tell your parents. And they can refer them. That's a scenario.
Right.
The way the law,
that therapist is going to affirm them.
Yeah, right. I mean, and so that's a scenario.
I have 4 kids. My youngest is 12. She'll be 13 next month. And as a parent, I get that every child is different. They all mature at different levels. And I would say, and I don't think she's watching, I don't think she's around. I would say my 12-year-old is actually a very young 12-year-old, which I love. She's my youngest. She's my baby. But I feel like my older daughter, who's now 16, I think she was a completely different 12-year-old than my current 12-year-old is as a 12-year-old. And not to say that my 16-year-old knew at 12, that she would know if she wanted to be a boy, but I just can't fathom my current 12-year-old being mature enough to make a single one of these decisions, being mature enough, having enough knowledge to make any, getting a COVID vaccine without my consent, getting any vaccine without my consent, struggling with those and going to a teacher. I homeschool, so it's not relevant to me, but it's one of the reasons why I homeschool. I mean, not to say that I saw all this, but I saw all this. So I've always homeschooled, but yeah, every kid matures at a different age. And so I don't see how we can even start to be lower the consent, because every 12-year-old is different.
Yep.
And it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Agreed. And listen, this is why I give that scenario, because when I bring this up, by the way, when I brought this up when we passed our Parents' Bill of Rights in Lakeside, and we had this discussion, when I brought that question up, some of my district staff was frothing at the mouth how angry they were with me just asking that hypothetical question. But guess what? They didn't have an answer to it because it's in the law. The law is at the age of consent. They say it's 12 years old for this kind of consent, right? What precludes, right, our district staff or anybody's staff, if you don't put measures in place to beat it down and block it and suspend those policies until it's aligned with board policy. And that's what we did in my district. We suspended regulations that are not based in law until they're in alignment with board policy. Well, they're not in alignment with board policy. So guess what? We're not doing it. And so to me, it's a matter of we cease enforcement of any of those kinds of policy because it's not in agreement. And when you do that, you protect yourself from the legal arguments on the other side that say, well, you're violating our rights as parents. And I don't want our district to get, in that kind of trouble.
Right. And I know we're talking about school board currently, but you are running for assembly. So to get to a whole slippery slope lane, this constant lowering the age of consent for all these things. And now I won't be surprised if it, in the next couple years soon, if suddenly we're trying to lower the age of consent to 12-year-olds sleeping with 18-year-olds and older, which I know they kind of tried something like that. And there was like a 6-year gap or something weird, but so now then it's the 12-year-old's word against the 18, 20-year-old's word of whether it was consensual. And it's just, kids need to be kids and parents need to be able to protect kids. And while I don't want government interference, they need to quit passing bills that is separating parents from kids. And now people are sending their kids to schools, which that's fine. But schools are about 8-ish hours a day, 6-8 hours a day. Your kids are there almost 40 hours a week, like a full-time job. The parents aren't there protecting the kids. And now the government's not protecting the kids because they're just going to be like, no, we're not telling the parents anything. We're just going to allow everything to happen. And so I had brought up even about this bill, like, okay, they're not going to out the one who wants to be trans, but what about my daughter having to now share a bathroom with this male, a biological male who wants to identify as female, sharing the gym, the sports, all that? Like, do they even consider any of these things? Now, my child is possibly at risk. Or even if this biological male isn't going to physically do anything to her, she's still being forced to change and share a bathroom with a biological male. Again, I homeschool, but.
Well, by the way, I always tell people, if you can homeschool, right? I mean, that's the way to go, because then you're kind of you're away from just this nonsense that we see in public schools all the time, right? And so one of the things I tell everybody, particularly when it comes to the bathroom stuff, is that and some of these other just weird things that they pass regarding bathrooms and everything, is I always tell people, you're required to be noticed of your rights as parents on all of those things, and you're told the path that is supposed to happen. And when these issues ever come up, I always tell a parent, listen, you have a right to have your kid change where they need to change, right? You do. And if that means they're all going to the nurse's office and there's a line of 35 kids that don't want to change with so-and-so, that's how we make change. You don't make change without people knowing what their rights are. And so that's why I've always been so pro telling everybody, listen, you as a parent have a lot of rights to determine what happens to your kids at school. And school districts don't want to tell you that, right? They don't want to tell you. They want to hide it in this massive big packet, and they don't want you to find it all because they want to be able to control everything. No, parents have a lot of rights and a lot of influence. And I want parents to know that, because nothing gives a school board member courage than a packed full room full of parents that are with them, supporting them. Nothing does. I mean, it's a huge, important thing for all of school board members to see that and not just school board members, but any kind of elected official, right? And the state will continue to pass these bills. They refuse to look at the real problems that we have, right? They want to talk about age of consent as opposed to the massive problems we have with homelessness, affordability, people fleeing the state and businesses leaving, all of this stuff. They don't want to talk about any of that. They want to talk about these issues because they want to blame conservatives and others for all these problems. And it's a nice red herring to distract them from their failure. Because, I mean, I don't think there's any Democrat that can say, who's been elected in Sacramento, that, oh yeah, Newsom's got a great record. I don't think we can talk about that. Crime, homelessness. I don't think anybody can say that that's, sex predators getting dumped in my neighborhoods, right? I mean, I don't think that's a good record.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a perfect segue into your candidacy. And you had stated you have experience in Sacramento, and you said, going to Sacramento, knowing how it works, knowing how the sausage is made. You worked for Joel Anderson and Brian Jones. Real quick, what are some tools and stuff you learned about Sacramento working for those two individuals?
Yep. Well, both of them are distinctly different individuals. And so I've learned kind of some way different things from both. But kind of to just, encompass everything I've kind of learned is it's the coalition building. When you get to Sacramento and when I get there, it's not a matter of me just, look, I'm going to scream all day long. But you know what I have found is that there will be one issue. Maybe it's foster care. Maybe it's rural healthcare access. Maybe it's infrastructure, dam infrastructure or something that's kind of non-political. That's just kind of quality of life stuff that you can work with people and build a coalition of a lot of people to make things happen. That is how you do it. Now, you can also do it to oppose things. And I want to give you an example. There was a few years ago, the legislature was voting, I think it was on the budget or on a bill that basically was going to strip GI benefits from some veterans in the state because there was a funding issue or whatever. And what ends up happening is you have to know how to kind of wedge that issue. I'm sorry, the Democrats were going to vote to strip GIs of their benefits. I mean, this is insane, from the state for college and tuition. I think it was tuition benefits. And so what ended up happening, what I learned is to oppose them. Guess what you do? You just amend bill after bill after bill to make them vote. Same kind of thing I did on a school board, right? Make them vote against veterans repeatedly on the floor. When they do that, they will finally come to you and go, okay, gosh, what do you want? What do you want? I want my bill about sex predators out of committee. Or whatever, right? Because you got to leverage them on the issues by building that coalition of veterans groups that would be there to speak, the press there to show they're voting against GIs, right? You put the heat on and you turn it up and you build that coalition. But you cannot do that alone. You've got to be able to build coalitions to get things accomplished, because we're in the super minority as Republicans, super minority. And part of my job is to not just be a lightning rod and fight against all the crazy wacko stuff that Sacramento wants to push down on us. The other part of my job is to say, I've got something done for you. And you have to be able to do both. You have to do both. And so I've learned from both of them how to do both. And both of them have done it in different ways. But you got to have something tangible, because I will tell you right now, when you return to your district, and they say to you, well, what have you accomplished or what have you done? And they will say that. They will ask you that. If all you say is, well, I fought really hard and voted no, they'll go, good for you, and pat you on the back. You fought and voted no. But if I say, hey, I didn't just vote no. I built a coalition and I restored GI benefits, right? That's just using an example, right? But those are the things that you have to be able to do. Not everybody can do that. And not everybody wants to do that. And it doesn't start with you saying to people, oh, you know what, you suck instantly. You don't know if that person sucks. You have no idea. There's Republicans who attack Republicans all the time. And it's like, I'm sorry, but they may be doing something for their district and they may come to you on another issue they're going to fight on. You don't know. And so you have to be able to build coalitions. So that's the one thing that I tell everybody is you've got to build a coalition. That's been my success, and my track record is building coalitions to get things accomplished. I can't do everything by myself because we're so outnumbered. And so you have to be able to band together and win. And you can. And I've seen lots of local victories. I've seen victories in Sacramento on a lot of these issues. I'll just give you an example. The human trafficking bill this last year, that was a huge success. Republicans beat the crap out of it, did a whole coalition building thing. Boom, it passed. We shamed them. We shamed them into submission on that bill. And that's a huge victory. So, to me, nobody talks about that a lot, of how that's a huge victory. And they say, well, they could have done it differently. I'm going, they built a coalition and they won a battle. And they can now go to their district and say, not only did I speak out for you, but I defeated something. Just voting no and not defeating anything, or just voting no and say, oh, I've got this initiative that we're going to do, that doesn't do anything. You got to have tangible results. Otherwise, people will go, again, it's, you ask, when a man promises the world tomorrow, I ask him what they did yesterday. You got to have deliverables. And that to me is so important, because if I go back to my district with nothing, they're going to say, you suck. You got to have deliverables.
Right. I agree. I'm going to ask you kind of a put you on the spot question, but I'm going to explain how I got there first, because everything you just said made me think of this question. But I actually was having what you just said. I had that conversation with Phil kind of recently about my own assemblyman, who I was saying, like, yeah, he votes the way we want him to vote, but he's not fighting. And I can think of some of our assembly members who are absolutely fighting, and I'm like, we need more of them. Name a current assembly member whose policies and maybe tactics, if you will, you respect and admire, and kind of, not to say that you want to be them, because everyone needs to be themselves, but like who would you say that you're like watching right now, who you really appreciate how they're working in the assembly?
Well, I'm going to praise James Gallagher. He's the leader. And you know what? James is smart. He's an operator, and he's somebody who's helping lead our message forward on things like that human trafficking stuff, on things like any of the crazy things that Newsom's coming out with. He speaks out against. The other thing is I would also tell you, a person I liked was Kevin Kiley when he was in the Assembly. I liked his tenacity, and he and James worked together on a lot of things, in fact, as I recall. But James is currently there. And so I think, and he's the leader. And so I think he's got to lead a caucus that's diverse. He has to show California Republicans that we're fighting for stuff. And I see him doing that. I see him speak on the floor. I see him speak to the press. I see him organize in his district. I see him represent his district. And one of the things I like about him is he'll quote things about his district. He'll say, hey, in this area, that ain't going to fly, right? In my district. And by the way, you've got to do that. You have to speak for your district. That's why you're elected. You're not elected in Sacramento. You're elected in your district. So I like the way that he approaches things, because he's able to move the needle. And again, he was one of the people who was a part of beating that human trafficking bill. Without the Assembly's help, without his leadership helping move that forward and take those opportunities, we would never have made that happen. So I want to praise him for his work, because I think he's leading the ship forward for us.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've noticed recently there seems to be a younger crop of Republicans in Sacramento who are getting creative with their tactics, which you have to do. You have to get creative and smart with your tactics, and being a little bit bolder. I feel like James Gallagher has his style, which he's doing very well. You have James Gallagher, or Bill Asaley, who's doing very well.
Yep.
Kate Sanchez is another one.
I like Kate as well. Yep.
So there's a lot of younger Republicans who are starting to figure out, and I think the party up there is starting to figure out social media, how to make very attractive, quick hitting clips. And I think there is something to like what you're saying, which is you kind of got to put the big glaring spotlight on Democrats in Sacramento. And it's kind of like, I hate to use this term because I don't think all Democrats in Sacramento are. There's probably some really nice ones. But like when you turn on the light and a whole bunch of cockroaches scurry, like that's almost like what it's like, where you got to blow the spotlight on them, especially that human trafficking bill, which, what was it? Susan Eggman, a progressive Democrat from the Bay Area. She got pushed so far that she gets up on the floor and goes, this is disgusting. I've been a progressive Democrat my whole life. I can't do this. Like, you guys are getting crazy. If you're getting her to flip on it, then you're doing a good job and you're building that coalition. So, I think that's how they got to do it. It's just, you guys gotta be smart, and you got to figure it out, and then slowly, hopefully flip some more seats so you can enact some real change. But does that coalition building, does that help with, and maybe this gets into your plans when you get into Sacramento, that coalition building, does that help with sort of not the hot button social issues, but the everyday Californian issues, affordability, maybe gas tax, stuff like that like Californians feel every day and go, California's too expensive, I can't afford it, or X, Y, and Z. Is that sort of your plan, or any idea what your plan when you get to Sacramento?
Well, absolutely. And by the way, the key part of building coalitions also equals relationships, right? I mean, you have to be able to that you can't build a coalition without a relationship. I mean, you have to do those things. And so, a common everyday issue that I hear about is the border, right? And how the border is just a disaster, and people are really ticked off about the fentanyl crisis and all of these things that come from what happens in the border. And I probably hear it more in my district because my district goes along the border. So I probably hear a lot more about the border, but I want to give you an example about coalition building and how that would work. Look, we can introduce a bill every day, and it's happened this year, by the way, about we got to get rid of the sanctuary state and we got to do all this stuff. Well, that bill didn't even get a hearing. We've got to do it because we got to put them on record on it. You have to do it. That's a mechanism you have to do. I'm not saying you don't do it. You've got to do that. But then you have to say, okay, what's next? So for me, what I see next is similar to what's happening with Prop 47. Law enforcement, state groups, local groups should qualify an initiative that say we want to end the sanctuary state because we want to be able to give mutual aid to the Border Patrol. And they can't do that right now. That's not even possible. They can't even cooperate with the feds on anything. They can't talk to them. They can't do any crime-related enforcement that has to do with that. They're, individual chiefs are kind of figuring out a way to maneuver around it, but there are some key things that they can't do. And so for me, you got to get law enforcement folks to say, we want to end the sanctuary state. Just like they said, we want to end Prop 47. And they got that initiative qualified, and you put it up for a vote. And you hit these folks at the ballot box with the initiative that may start with a legislative, bill that allows for legislators to gather support in their district so they can then communicate with these organizations that say, oh, hey, by the way, these are people in our districts who support this initiative. You should go and talk to them. And you crowdsource and you build that kind of momentum. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you're just going to get a vote. You're going to get voted down. You may not even get a hearing on the bill, and you won't gain momentum with it. So you want to use every part of the toolkit: media, initiative, bill, petition, every single thing, whatever possible, your bully pulpit press conferences, whatever you have to do to then be able to say, okay, we're going to push this forward. And in certain cases, like the sanctuary state, we need the voters to say, we want to get rid of this. We need to have law enforcement provide mutual aid. And so that's just one example. As it comes to the gas tax is the biggest, problem that everybody wants to talk about. And what I tell everybody is, let's talk about that. We can talk about that. But what we really should be talking about is the mileage tax and all these mileage proposals that they want to try to put forward, because that's the gas tax is a nice red herring for the Democrats to feed to us and say, oh yeah, let them focus on that, while they're over here planning to track us in our cars and how much miles we drive. We need to get out in front against all that stuff, and we need to be ahead of the game on that. And so, we can propose a lot of things on the gas tax, but what we saw when that was introduced is that, that failed. Right now, what I would love to see is an audit of the gas tax money, because I'm going to tell you right now, I've never seen where that money goes. Because in my district, I don't know about your communities, but roads ain't getting built in my communities. And my district needs roads because I represent rural East County, San Diego. We will always need roads. There will be no trolley going from my community to the desert. That's not going to happen. So they're going to be driving on the freeway and on roads, and we're always going to need it. But if the gas tax funds all of it, where'd it go? I'd like to see it. And I'll tell you where it went. It goes into Caltrans coffers. And I can say that because my mom worked for Caltrans for 35 years. So I can tell you that there's a lot of big bureaucracy out there. And that's where the money goes. And if people think otherwise, fine, prove it in an audit.
I don't know where it goes either, because I live in the city of San Diego, and I know there's several roads. Anybody who's listening and knows Ingram, just until recently, Ingram Avenue in San Diego was like you needed a Jeep Wrangler to get over, because it felt like it was off-roading. Like literally, like your car was like, so people know like how bad it was. They just recently paved it. I don't know how many years it took Todd Gloria to get around to fixing the roads, his new sexy roads initiative or whatever he calls it. So I'd love to see that audit too. I'd love to see it sort of like what Josh Hoover did with the homeless audit. I think that would be eye-popping for a lot of Californians to be like, well, where did this money go? Where is it? And how come we don't see an improvement in the roads or what we're paying for? So obviously coalition building is really important when you get to Sacramento because you're in such a minority. It requires you to reach across the aisle, work with people that maybe you don't get along with. And you had brought up Republicans attacking other Republicans, which leads us to the question of your opponent, who is also a Republican in this district, Carl Tamayo. Anybody who's watched this show knows we've done plenty of episodes on Carl Tamayo. Any comment on him as an opponent or what differentiates you from your opponent?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we're very different in many ways. But I think the key distinction between the two of us is, I have a record of success. I've beat tax increases. I've done things that on a school board, I've been elected to a school board that has been moving the needle. I want to build coalitions. I don't want to just scream on Fox News and then not present a solution. And so, I also would like to qualify initiatives that I propose. I recently read an article that he didn't turn in any signatures on any of the last 5 initiatives that he massively fundraised for. And so I find that fascinating. And I would think his supporters would want to know that. But I think all of that comes down to, I'm not doing this because, I just want to be in the assembly. I'm doing it because I want to make where I'm from better. I didn't have to move to the district. I didn't have to do any of those things.
Oh, he didn't move.
Oh, I know he didn't move, but I'm just telling you, I didn't have to say I did that. I didn't have to come out with this, I need to save the state and kind of what nonsense. I didn't have to say that. I just had to say, listen, I want to make things better and I want to fix California. And I want to do that by building coalitions. My opponent has never built a coalition that's not benefited him in his entire career. I've not seen it. And I've worked around him for many years. So I mean, and so that's where I think we're different is I want to build coalitions to get things done and improve our brand. And one of the things that I've learned is you really have to find areas to deliver for your constituents. I don't want to be another placeholder that sits there and gets nothing done. I don't want to do that. And why go to Sacramento to do that? There are a lot of other things that people can do than go and run to be in the state assembly. And I'm doing it because I'm from this district and I want to see things get better because I'm tired of my friends leaving. I'm done with it. I'm over it. And I don't want to visit them in Phoenix or Tennessee anymore. I like both of those places, but not as much as where I'm from. And so, I think the key thing though, is that's really the difference between the two of us is that I want to see things get accomplished. I don't want to just scream loudly about it. I want to see it get done. Now, am I going to scream? Yeah, I've done that. I have a record of doing that. Hence why I say when a man promises to the world tomorrow, ask him what he did yesterday. I have a record of screaming about problems. I mean, I've done that. So I'll do that again, and I'll continue to do that. That's just part of the toolkit, part of my nature. But it's also about, hey, if somebody says to me, there's a problem that overlaps my district, like sex predators getting dumped in the backcountry of my community, and that's happening in their district too, and they're a Democrat, heck yeah, I'm going to partner with them. My opponent would say that it's evil to partner with them. I'm going, if it helps my constituents on an issue that impacts my constituents, like sex predators, come on. Yeah. That's common sense. That's called common sense.
Yeah. So you're saying you have a better electoral success rate than 1 in 5, I believe his record is?
Oh, that is true. Yes, I'm definitely saying that. I'm also saying that the initiatives that I put forward are not just to benefit myself. They're actually to help my community. So
we got about 10 minutes left. Let's talk about the future. You get to Sacramento. What are your top 3 priorities? Now, again, I know that it's a lot of based on working with the coalitions, what's going on. But what are the top 3 priorities that are top of mind for you when you get to Sacramento?
Well, first thing is I mentioned to you this sanctuary state initiative thing. That is one of the top things I want to try to conquer is I want to find a way to get that gone. And so that's one key thing. And as I described to you, it's about introducing a bill. It's about putting people on record. We talked about the gas tax. I want to audit I want to get an audit going. I want to use that. I want to try to get an audit to get that data so that we can then use it as a way to bludgeon the Democrats and put that spotlight, as you will, on where it's going, more government waste that really ticks off people in the middle. But I also, the sex predators thing is a huge issue in my district. Fire insurance is another thing I'll talk about in a minute. But the sex predator thing really gets me angry, and I'll tell you why. In my district, my school district, there was 6 serious sex offenders placed in one home near a school bus stop.
Wow.
Crazy town. So I went to the house and I drove by it, and it's true. Looked at Megan's map. It's scary. So I held a press conference there, and I looked at all, and then they were gone after we held the press conference because the state contractor was like, no. But in the meantime, they had sent me a cease and desist letter that I was violating the rights of the sex offender. And sex offenders, I'm going, what are you talking about? This is insane. So I went and I looked up the law. The law allows for there to be 6 sex offenders, serious sex offenders, living in a house near a school bus stop. That's crazy. That's just crazy. So drawing attention to that is important. But then there's also the sex predator placement program for violent predators who repeatedly rape children, right? All of these things, and they're mentally ill. They're defining.
That's not prison?
Huh?
That's not prison? That's not their permanent housing situation? Prison?
No.
Okay.
No, the program's all screwed up. It's called the ConRep program, and if you read it, blood will shoot out of your eyes. I promise. And it is the scariest, most crazy thing. These are evil people. These are just demented people who, rape children, and they're sick. They're mentally ill. They're defined in code as mentally ill. So they live in the Department of State Hospitals. Well, then the Department of State Hospitals has this program called the ConRep program that then places them in the county where they committed their first crime. I'm going, this is insane. It's why, but that's the law. It's crazy. So there's an audit right now that was spearheaded by Senator Jones that was unanimously passed, by the way, in the JLAC committee, which is a feat. So that's another coalition I'm talking about. But there's an audit going on right now on this program. Once that audit comes out, you take that audit, and it will come out. Once that audit comes out, boom, we're going to take that, make legislation, put it together, their feet to the fire, and get them placed on prison property forever, because that's where they should be. They should not be in neighborhoods ever. So what they end up doing, though, is they dump them in my district, in Campo, in Jacumba, in Lakeside, in Boulevard, in Borrego Springs, in all these rural areas that have less people. Oh, I'm sorry, those are my people. You don't get to just dump them in my community. That's nonsense. So that stuff really makes me mad, and I get very angry about it. And so those are things I want to move the needle for. Last thing is fire insurance. We need to change the way that the insurance commissioner, he needs to be held accountable. That guy, whoever it may be, they're not doing their job. They're not regulating the market. They're just saying, oh, we're just not going to do anything whatsoever. Well, the fire insurance problem was created because bureaucracy just said, nope, we're good. And guess what? The governor can't do anything because he's not under the purview of the governor. He's elected himself, so he could just sit there and do nothing, which he did. And that's part of the reason why we're in this problem. And then the legislature, you don't want them to do too much, let me tell you, but because they'll create some, Cal Fair, some massive government funded insurance plan that covers everybody. And it'll be like government controlled healthcare kind of thing, but they want to do it in insurance. But anyway, the point I'm making is, solving that will require coalitions. And the only way to solve it is to increase competition. So we got to get these insurers back. And the only way to do that is allow them to mitigate risk. And the insurance commissioner said, no, we won't do that, because he doesn't want to talk to them because they're evil. And it's like, well, government ain't going to help us. So.
Well, I learned something new. I had never even heard about that wild sex offender law. I mean, that's mind blowing. Why would you put a sex offender who commits heinous crimes against children back in the county where they committed the crime? How does that make the victim feel safe at all?
It's absolute insane. And by the way, that's the sexually violent predator thing. It's crazy. And it's like, okay. And it's technically called county of domicile, by the way. Well, guess where they commit their crimes? Near their home. So, I mean, it's nonsense. And it's just sad because people don't know about this stuff, and I want people to know, and that's why I go out and scream about it, because I want everybody to know how crazy it is.
Well, we got a couple minutes left. I had one quick,
Sure.
rapid fire question for you before we finish up for tonight. Any propositions coming to the ballot in November that you particularly have your eye on that you think people should look into more?
Yes. Do not be fooled by their ideas of rent control. Do not be fooled. They're going to come at you and say, oh, it's run by all these apartments are run by all these wealthy people, blah, 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 blah. If rent control goes through, your rents are going to skyrocket. It's going to be less affordable. Rent control is not the solution. So I'm telling everybody all the time, don't be hoodwinked about the rent control thing. When you look at the economics of it, the people pass on the cost. Do not fall for it. So be very cautious about the rent control initiative that they're coming out with. And then the other one is, of course, the Prop 47 initiative that's going to repeal that. Get out there, support it. Let's get that problem fixed. And this is the only way to do it. So let's get it done. Those are the two that I want everybody to pay real close.
Do we know the number on that? I know it's listed, but I don't remember what it is.
I think it's Prop 36. And don't hold me to that, but I think it's 36.
Okay.
Sounds right. I feel like it's in the 30s for some reason. But Andrew, it was a pleasure having you on. Any final words to our listeners before we hop off for the night?
Thank you for having me. And if you ever have questions or want to learn more about me, electandrewhayes.com. Excellent.
Short and sweet. Go check them out. You're on social media as well if people want to follow you there, right?
Yeah, at elect Andrew Hayes. Or I'm sorry, at Andrew Hayes CA. That's what it is. Andrew Hayes CA. Perfect. Is my handle or whatever it's called.
Your username, your handle, whatever. Just search Andrew Hayes CA and you'll find him on Instagram and everywhere. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Moral of the story is the issues we've talked about tonight, these are all local issues. So make sure you pay attention to who you're voting for locally. I know we're all crazy about Trump and Kamala, but it's it's people like Andrew going to Sacramento that makes a big difference in our everyday lives. So with that, I'd like to say thank you for tuning in. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, review, all of that stuff. And the best way to support this show that is 100% free is send it to someone who you think would get something out of this. If you're in Andrew's district, send it to someone in that district and make sure you share Andrew's message. And with that, we'll see you on the next one. Night, everybody.